Everybody loves dads, stories, and the Marine Corps. What could be better than Marine Corps dads who tell stories? Here's another story with veteran storyteller John Sugar Jr., a Marine Corps dad.
Tonight, we're going to tell the story of the roach that invaded Cleveland. Once upon a time, there was a little roach, and his name was Steve. And Steve the roach was roaching along. Now, you know roaches like to eat food. And so Steve the roach was on the prowl for food. And he loved gas stations, because at gas stations, people will go in, they will buy food in packages, but when they open up the packages, little crumbs fall out of the packages, like Twinkies. And Twinkie crumbs are the best. And Steve was like, yes, every time he got a Twinkie crumb. So he would roach along to go get Twinkie crumbs for the day. But there was a trail of them. And Steve said, Steve, and went to follow the Twinkie crumbs. Out into the parking lot he went, following the Twinkie crumbs. And he would grab a Twinkie crumb, and he would eat the Twinkie crumbs. And he got out in the middle of the parking lot, and he saw a whole Twinkie. Perfect and shining in the way that Twinkies do, in the middle of the parking lot. And Steve said, yes! And he reached out a little claw for the Twinkie. And a car ran over the Twinkie.
No!
And Steve's little claw was still out. And his mouth was open as he looked and saw a little flat Twinkie in the parking lot, and it had dirt mixed into it. The cream had gotten squirted over there. It was awful. And Steve fell to his little roach knees beside the Twinkie and screamed at the sky. And he looked with his little roach eyes at the murderer of that perfect Twinkie. And on the license plate, because Steve somehow could read, Steve saw one word: Cleveland. And as that car drove off into the night, Steve yelled with his little roach voice, Cleveland! And so Steve packed a bag. A little roach bag. Little fanny pack.
What's a fanny pack?
For his little roach fanny. And he set out on a journey. Dun, 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 dun. And he got hit by a truck. But Steve is a roach. It's really hard to kill roaches. So he just walked it off. And kept walking. And he was like, just how far away is Cleveland? I've never walked more than like 8 feet in my life, ever. Where is Cleveland? And he had no idea where Cleveland was. What do I do?
Yeah.
I don't know. And so, Steve kept walking. And cars kept going past him. And Steve decided to try something. Steve climbed up onto a little pole, because he noticed all these cars would stop at the lights whenever the lights were certain colors. Now, Steve is colorblind. He has no idea what's going on or why they're doing that. But he knows that when the light changes to a certain other color, everybody starts going again. So he climbs up, and he lurks, like little bat roach. And as soon as they started to go, he went, and jumped off of the lights and onto a car. And that car started driving so fast. It was faster than Steve had ever gone in his whole life. And so Steve is holding on to the top of the car with his little claws dug in as far as... It was so fast. In fact, Steve got hit in the face with another bug.
Yeah.
Steve is hanging on. And that other bug was like... And Steve is like hanging on with one claw now. But Steve wanted his vengeance. So he stayed on the car. Claws sunk into the metal. Because he was going to Cleveland, and he was going to punish Cleveland. Now, Steve had no plan for what he was going to do when he got to Cleveland. He had no idea what he was going to do. He's like, all I have are these little roach hands. But he's like, I will slowly erode the bedrock of society in Cleveland. I will doom them. And so Steve rode on that car for as long as he could until the hawk snatched him. And the hawk took Steve up into the sky. And Steve said, ah! And he's like hitting the hawk's foot, trying to shank it. And that hawk took him up and up and up and up. And Steve was like, ah! Because the ground is getting really far away, even for Steve. Ah! Fortunately for Steve, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at these things, the hawk was killed by a jetliner. The hawk was sucked into the turbine engine of a passing Delta aircraft. The engine on the Delta aircraft blew up. Shrapnel from that engine hit the engine next to it, which is supposed to take over if the first engine fails. As the metal got sucked into the jet turbine, you guys ever heard the disposal in the sink when you have a spoon left in it? Sounded like that, and then it sounded like... Both sides of this plane are now on fire. Understand, Steve is in the middle of this. He was in a hawk's claw, and then suddenly everything was on fire. Steve is now falling through the sky with little bits of burning hawk all around him. As he's falling towards the ground. And to him, it's... To everyone else, it was just... That jetliner took a nosedive into the middle of Cleveland. It dug a burning trail, flopped end over end, took out an apartment complex, took out the Walmart, took out the Lowe's, took out that little taco truck at the end of the street. Pedro was like, ah! Steve is falling, ah! And he lands on a power pole. So he can see. And he's like, Now, Steve doesn't weigh very much, so hitting the ground doesn't really bother him very much. So he gets up, and he's looking with his little roach eyes, and there he sees Cleveland is on fire. And the fire spread. And sirens were going off, and people were yelling, ah! 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 And Steve raised his little roach hands. And Steve said, that was for my Twinkie. The end.
That was another story with John Shurker Jr., a Marine Corps dad. Check the show notes for links to his Patreon and website at creativegrumbles.com.